Hello, happy Sunday. So today, Coach Caroline is going to be joining me, and we decided to do an Instagram Live all about kind of the holiday season and the new year. And we're just really excited to share kind of our different perspectives. We actually knew each other in college. So it's really fun to see how both of our career paths have kind of joined. We're really interested in some of the same things. So I'm going to invite Caroline on right now, and then she can introduce herself to those who don't know her. See if it'll work. Hello.
Hello.
It's always weird with Instagram Lives because then you have to readjust yourself to make you fit in the screen.
I know.
Well, how are you?
I'm good. Good morning.
Yeah.
Sorry if I sound stopped up. I kind of am. I've been sick AF for like a week. But I'm here. This is a good, nice start. I'm very grateful for some makeup this morning.
Yes, absolutely. And some coffee. I love that we did our coffee. Ooh, yes. So festive. Yeah, so I was just telling people on the live that, we knew each other in college, but it's really fun to see how both of our careers have and interests have really crossed paths. And although we have different life journeys, they do have a lot of similarities as well. So as we kind of get started, do you just want to introduce yourself to the people who might not know you?
Of course. Hello, everyone. My name is Caroline Offenstein. A lot of people call me Coach Caroline. And I work as a holistic health coach. So really taking a lot of the scientific practicalities of health and fitness and mixing them with the spiritual mind, body, soul connection pieces as well. So some work with personal training, with macros, but honestly, where I see the best results with my clients is when we go a layer deeper than that, which is kind of what we're digging into today.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was also my journey as well. Even in college, when we knew each other, I was very, very into health, fitness, all of that stuff. And I thought that was bettering myself and doing the work. And it's a great thing, right? But when it becomes obsessive and when it becomes it doesn't serve us, then that's when we kind of have to take a look at it. But I discovered too, once you kind of go a layer deeper, especially, not only with myself, but also with clients, it's usually never about the numbers, I'm talking about weight. It's usually never about the weight. It's never about, just stopping eating certain foods. It's all about layer deeper, which is usually, some of those mindset blocks and like you said, the spirituality piece or manifestation. So we could go on and on about all of that. But for our time today, I know that we were talking about just how this is kind of a unique time and how this can bring up a lot of things for people, both in probably the health realm, but also just in the overall stress realm. So what have you kind of been seeing with your clients, or why is this such a unique time?
Yeah, so I mean, the holidays are busy, first of all, right? We all have all the grocery shopping to do, the holiday parties, the family stuff, family in town or traveling, that adds a whole element. So since we get so busy and we think we have so many things to do, I think that also takes a lot of the joy out of the holiday season. So I know we're going to talk about a little bit of stress and relaxation and things like that today, but just to briefly touch on the food piece too, since that's a lot of what I work with, I want to just put this out there that it is so possible to purely enjoy your holiday season with the fun foods and not feel like you're going overboard, not feel like you need to diet in January. Because let me tell you, even 2 years ago when I was between contest preps for bodybuilding, I definitely was binge eating Christmas cookies because I was so deprived in calories which that can be a huge driver on the practical side. If you are restricting a lot, if you have a lot of food rules that you're following, that just makes this time of year 10 times harder because your body is in that restricted mode. And people are like, oh, I just can't control myself around sweets. It's probably more likely that you're constantly restricting sweets. So then you want them more, right? One quote that I love is, want is only present when there is lack. And that I think is really powerful in terms of food, because if we're constantly saying, I can't have that, I shouldn't have it, it's too high calorie, it's too high fat, you're going to be thinking about it because you're focused on the lack of having it. And that just makes you want more of it. So a really cool thing to do this time of year is to just start slowly releasing the reins, like right now. If you feel like you're already nervous about Thanksgiving or the Christmas cookies, a good thing to practice now is just slow and steady, letting yourself have more of those foods, especially sugar, because sugar to our bodies is pure energy. It's pure calories, right? Like that is what sugar is. It's pure calories. So usually we're craving that if we have been restricting. So that would be one kind of practical thing I offer at this time of year. That doesn't necessarily happen overnight, but allowing yourself to feel less restricted this time of year is really powerful. And I know we're going to get more into beliefs and mindset as well, but just another like proof or evidence for you that this is so possible. I had zero of my clients this year had any stress about the holidays. Like it honestly hasn't come up for my clients, which I just realized that last week. I was like, oh my gosh. And this is the year of my business where I really took things deeper than macros or fitness and went to that layer of your mind of everything else that's going on in here. And it was really cool to see that like zero of my clients had any stress or even really asked me about holiday eating. So like just more proof that it is so possible to just be connected with your body and your loved ones and the holiday cheer this time of year.
Right. I know. It seems so, like when we put it like this, it seems so easy. And it can be that easy. There's a lot of things that can get in the way of like, just things that we've been taught. Like, oh my God, okay, no, I can't have this treat or I can't have this. But when we kind of allow ourselves that freedom, all of a sudden those things don't become so, like they don't grab you, like you feel like you have control over your choices now because you gave yourself the freedom to choose that if you want. It's like all about choice instead of, like you said, restricting. So yeah, that's a huge thing. And that's certainly what I notice with my clients as well. Yeah. So, and you also mentioned, that we would be going into, the stress of the holidays and kind of finding like those relaxation and calm in the midst of all the busyness, in the midst of sometimes the chaos. So I'd love to hear if you have any particular tips for this busy time of year.
Yeah, so I personally am a huge fan of meditation, and I know that's not for everyone, but what I have kind of how I've translated that to say like my clients or anyone who is like, man, I just feel like there's so much going on, but I'm not going to sit, like, let's be real. I'm just not going to sit and meditate for 20 minutes every day. That's okay. You don't have to do that. I do think it's very powerful. So it is something I like to throw out there still. But what I have started recommending to people is what I call a mellow moment. And it's basically just any period of stillness or quiet throughout your day. So no, it doesn't have to be sitting in silence with your eyes closed, but it could be like knitting this time of year is kind of a nice thing to do. Maybe it's like baking. Maybe baking is a nice quiet activity for you. Maybe it's painting or drawing or journaling. The idea is to do something that gets you out of your doing mind, come back into your body a little bit, have some quiet time. Because if your mind's always running, and you're thinking about what's next and you're worried about what just happened and what's to come, it's really hard to receive any of those like pings from your intuition or from the universe or God or whatever you want to think about it. It's really hard to notice those messages and to feel connected to your body and to feel grounded in this life if your brain's constantly going. So like that is my number one recommendation, especially for this time of year, is just to have a mellow moment, have any time of day where you're not physically thinking, physically doing a lot, but you're just being still and quiet kind of in that moment.
Yes. Yes. All great tips. And just to kind of piggyback off of that, of course, I'm a huge proponent of meditation. For those that don't know me, I'm not sure if people know me or not, just depending on who's on your end of the followers. But I'm a hypnotherapist, so of course I'm all into the mindset and kind of stilling your mind and your body. But I also realize that can feel very daunting to people to like sit down for 20 minutes. And even there's for hypnotherapy, it's mostly about, at least I find it easier to relax, versus meditation for me is more of like an active practice of kind of observing thoughts and things like that. But what I will add to that is, even if you can find 1 minute of your day, 5 minutes of your day, kind of like sit with yourself, with your thoughts. What I like to do, first thing in the morning is to just do like a couple nice deep breaths. And especially during this time of year where we're being kind of pulled in multiple different directions. I know that you got a question about this, of like, how do we kind of find time for ourselves, or how do we make sure that our needs are being met? What I like to do, regardless of the season, is ask myself, like, after I did a couple nice deep breaths, and just ask myself, like, what do you need right now? And maybe it's something as simple as like, okay, right now, like I need a Christmas cookie, or right now I actually need, to go for a nice long walk, or I need to, whatever it is, go skiing, we don't have snow here in Arizona, but go to the pool. So it's just really getting honest with yourself and asking yourself, what is it that you need? And then another thing that came to mind when we were talking about, like, how can we find like those pockets of calm and peace during this time, which is so funny because this season is all about peace, right? It's like we're wishing each other peace, but sometimes it can feel the exact opposite of that. But a practice that we do is anchoring to something. So this could be as simple as, so if you think of how you want to feel, so if you want to feel calm, or if you want to feel peace, maybe for you, you're anchoring to the feeling of joy. Whatever it is, you can pick a feeling and then anchor it to a physical object, or anchor it to your breath, or anchor it to like a movement that you do. So an example of this would be like, okay, if I want to feel peace, maybe my anchor is me just like pressing my fingers together like this. And so how you anchor that, of course you can do that like in an actual hypnotherapy session, but you can do that like just now. So if you think right now of like a super chaotic situation and you're like, oh my God, you kind of bring yourself to that place, then all of a sudden you think of the most peaceful place that you've ever been, the most relaxed that you've ever been. And at that exact moment, you press your fingers together, you're now creating an anchor, so that throughout your day, whenever you go like this, you're creating that association in your mind so that it automatically brings you back to that peaceful place. I just worked with a client on, she had like a crystal that she holds and she likes to rub. So kind of like, a stone that you can rub, or a crystal or something. And if you just have that in your pocket, that's a great thing too, because that's like a physical object. The one thing that I'll add about anchoring, you can even do that with like a color. So maybe you anchor that piece with the color green, because green is everywhere during this time. Yeah. And then whenever you see that color green, then you're just like, again, there's that automatic association. But the one thing that I was going to add is like, make sure that this is a super doable thing. So sometimes people will want to anchor in that feeling of like joy or like accomplishment by running 3 miles. okay, if we're at the Thanksgiving dinner table and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I need some calm, or I need joy, or whatever it is that you're searching for, it's not really doable to leave the table and run 3 miles. Like, peace out, everyone, I'm going to go. What's really doable is maybe reaching into your pocket for that stone that you can rub, or going like this. You could even anchor it to your breath, just like finding something that's doable for you. And if you want it to be kind of secretive, like where people wouldn't question what you're doing, you can absolutely do that too. You know, like this, like no one's going to know what I'm actually doing. You don't have to. So it can be a really powerful practice.
Have you ever heard those called glimmers?
I haven't.
No, I was listening to someone else talk about this on a podcast, I think it was, and she called them glimmers. More of like things that you see throughout your day. So like if you do have crystals, or if you have a favorite candle, it's like the opposite of a trigger, right? A trigger would be like, I'm frustrated now, or I'm thinking about my body and I'm being critical now. A glimmer is like the opposite. So I bought this candle that I really like, and it smells so good. And every time I look at it, or every time I light it, I use that as my glimmer to like connect with the positive feelings. So that's like super similar. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And what a great idea. If you have like a physical, you know, if your anchor isn't a physical action, if you have that in mind of what it is that you're anchoring to, or that glimmer, you can put that, you know, throughout your whole house. Or maybe you bring like a couple pieces, you know, to where you're going for the holidays.
Yeah. I know. So fun. Yeah, those are some good strategies. I've done anchoring before in hypnotherapy, and I really liked it. So yeah. And I think you brought up
powerful.
Yeah. And I think you brought up one of the questions. You want to get into that one? Should I read it?
Yeah.
Okay. This was a question, I think we'll just keep them anonymous, from Instagram. The question originally was, how do I choose or prioritize me without feeling selfish? Good question. And the first thing I want to do here is call out the story, right? Because it is automatically how this question is worded. The first thing I noticed was the story that this person is telling themselves is, it's selfish to prioritize me. So that is typically the first step that I recommend with anyone. It's that awareness piece, right? So like, oh, I had this thought, wait, is it selfish to prioritize me? Like, why do I have that belief? Where did that come from? And if you can just start going down that path of being aware that there is this story that you're carrying, that right there is a super powerful first step.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And after you're kind of aware of that, then you can begin to come up with the reasons of why it's actually not selfish to prioritize yourself. Like, think of all the energy that you now have. If you give yourself that 10 minutes of you time, or that 30 minutes or an hour, however much time that you want. For me, it's like much longer than 10 minutes. Like, I take a lot of time. But like, imagine how much energy on the other side that you have now that you can give to others, or that you can just be present with others. I think one of the greatest gifts during this time that you alluded to is like really being present with our loved ones, really being present with the moment. So if you give yourself that time on the front end, or even in the midst of things, you're automatically going to be more present, and you're automatically going to be able to show up better for yourself and those around you. So yeah. And then, like I said earlier, is like, you know, just really getting honest with yourself. Like, what is it that you actually need? Because a lot of times, like, even I'm guilty of this. If someone is like, oh, I don't know, like, oh, I'm hungry, or, oh, I'm like, they're telling me their needs. Then I'm like, oh yeah, that's what I want to do too. Or, oh, I want to help you. Instead of really getting honest with myself and being like, actually, right now, what I need is 5 deep breaths, you know?
Yeah. And I think a good way for women to practice this, that I work with a lot of my clients on this, is when you think of the, like, usually for most women, it's the week before your period. It's kind of when you have some PMS, when you're a little bit more tired, maybe there's some slight mood swings going on. You know, it's normal to have some changes in your body and your mood around this time. It's not normal. Obviously, if those are like affecting your quality of life, that's when you should really work with a professional. But it's normal to have a little bit of PMS, like the last week of your cycle. So what I like to recommend is this is a time where it can feel like hard to slow down. It's like, wait, am I really supposed to like give myself extra chill time for a week every month? Kind of, yeah. And all that does is set you up for the rest of your month being that much easier. Because how crappy do you feel if you're like kind of run down, you're kind of like, oh man, I don't know if I can do all this that I have on my to-do list, and you force yourself to show up extra and to do more. It just like is a never-ending loop towards more burnout and not feeling great. So it's kind of that whole like fill your cup first thing, right? Is basically I think what both of us are kind of saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And the like I love to do this, and I know that one of the topics that we were going to touch on is fear, and this also relates to fear. Like I'm sure that it's going to be the same advice that I would give. So when we can give our subconscious mind new evidence in support of these new beliefs, it's so much better. So what this means would be if you are instead of the story that's happening right now is that it's selfish for me to take me time, I would invite you to take you time and then notice how other people react as well. Because I would assume that the fear there is that other people might call you selfish, or the fear there is that other people might get mad at you. So now that's an opportunity to create new evidence in support of like, okay, you took your me time and people still weren't mad at you. That's evidence. That's positive evidence for your subconscious mind, which will make it even easier for you then to prioritize yourself. So yeah, just another tip is like kind of getting really clear on, okay, what is the fear there of me taking this me time? Is the fear there that other people might not love you anymore, might get mad at you? Is the fear there that, you won't get everything on your to-do list done? Okay, then dive deeper than that. What's the fear if you don't get everything done? Then you're a failure, or that, again, maybe people will get mad at you. So, and then if we can create evidence for doing the thing and then having like a positive association with that, the better.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. That's really good practical strategies. And even just, this is kind of like a journal exercise that I like to do, which maybe this is going to go right perfectly into fear around kind of new goals and how that comes up. But is with these beliefs, what's really helped me in the past is grabbing my journal and writing down all of the stories that are coming up, all of the beliefs of like, if I take time for myself, it's selfish. If I rest, it's lazy. Things like that. Like list out everything your inner critic is saying. And then what you can do is turn the page and write down all the beliefs that you want to have about self-care or about rest. Like rest only helps me become more productive and more successful in my business, or self-care helps me show up for others better in my business or my family or whatever it may be. So that's really powerful, I think, too. And that goes into a lot of that fear around new goals and the unknown that we were talking about.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So that's a perfect segue into new goals, and along with like new year, it's associated with goals, and associated with goals, a lot of times there is a fear there, whether we're aware of that or not. What I've been noticing actually in myself is that when I set goals and when I, kind of reprogram them in my mind, there's not much fear there, because I'm not taking any action at all. It's not like I'm just sitting on my couch all day. But what I've been finding is like, oh yeah, like I'm totally good in that area. Okay, but then once I actually start taking action towards my goals in that particular area, then a lot of fear will come up for me. So I just kind of want to like explain why fear comes up for us. especially as it relates to the subconscious mind. So the subconscious mind, its main goal, well, one is to keep us alive, but in keeping us alive is to keep us safe. And when we think of safe from a conscious perspective, right, we're like, okay, well, that would mean, it's safe for me probably to have more money, and it's safe for me to have a loved one, and it's safe for me to whatever. But according to our subconscious mind, that definition of safety is often very different. So safety to the subconscious mind essentially means normal. So whatever it is that you are used to, that's what your comfort zone, that's what the subconscious mind will associate with safety. So that's why it can be so scary to even take a little step towards your goals, because that's very different than what you've been used to. And especially with the subconscious mind, it's all about, like, you had mentioned, like, the stories that we tell about ourselves and about the world and those beliefs, but also like our identity is so rooted in our subconscious mind. So when we're doing anything out of alignment with that identity that we set for ourselves, maybe that identity, if let's just go with health, because that's an easy example. So if your identity is someone who struggles with health, it's going to be very scary to your subconscious mind then to, do something new that might be in alignment with what someone who, like, fully loves, accepts themselves, and, has optimal health, whatever it is that your goal is. So that's why fear comes up. Although for me, it makes it a little bit easier. And, like, I have a lot more compassion for myself when I understand it from that.
Oh yeah. Same.
Yeah. And so just to tie it back, like, to we were just talking about, like, getting the evidence in terms of, like, how time is not selfish. Yeah. It's the same thing that I do with fear as well. And for me, well, actually, I was going to say, for me, usually it's easier to take, like, small little steps. Sometimes if I just have, like, you had mentioned pings earlier, if I just have a ping to just run for it, just go for it. Like, sometimes I will take very big leaps and it's very scary, but sometimes it's almost easier because it's, like, so big and you're like, all right, I'm doing it. You have, like, that adrenaline rush. But for me, most often it's easier if I take those little steps. But the more and more that I take those little steps, it's, again, creating that evidence for my subconscious mind of, like, oh, okay, so this is seeming to be normal now. Okay, now we're doing Instagram lives. All right, this is normal. Whereas the first time it was like, oh, what's happening?
Yeah.
So that's my take on fear. And I'd love to hear anything that you do in particular when fear comes up.
Yeah, I love the explanation, and that is really what has helped me, that I've learned from a lot of manifestation teachers. Anything we don't have right now, it's in that unknown place.
Yeah.
So we have to go into the unknown if we want to get it, right? So otherwise we're just in our comfort zone, and all of our desires and our life dreams are over here. And if we just stay here, well, yeah, it's going to feel safe, but then you can't get there. So I told this story on my Instagram a couple of weeks ago. I had a trip that I've been manifesting finally came through this year for me, and I booked everything and then had, like, a panic attack. Like, I think as close as I've ever, it wasn't, I don't mean to minimize people who actually have those, because it wasn't a panic attack, but it was as close as I have ever come. And I was literally like, I need to cancel everything. What am I thinking? What am I doing? My business is going to fail. Like, all of these thoughts. And I was like, oh shit. I've studied this before, but I've never really noticed it happening to me. And it's like that self-sabotage. I was ready to cancel everything and say, nope, just kidding, this isn't happening, because I was my, like, central nervous system was so nervous about this new level, about all these unknowns. And, people in fitness and in the health space are very familiar with the self-sabotage term. And it pretty much is the same thing. It's your body doesn't feel safe. your body feels like you're in an unsafe situation and it wants to default into the way that you used to do things, like say how you used to eat, or basically undo the changes that you're making to get back to that comfort zone. So knowing that, just like you said, I think it really does help with that lens of compassion for yourself and being like, oh, it's okay that I feel scared. It's okay that I'm second guessing myself. Or in terms of food, it's okay that I overate yesterday. That was just my body saying, I'm not safe right now. So what are some other ways we could create safety? And thinking about that's going to be totally, totally different for everybody. But that would be the question. The next question I would say to ask yourself is, how can I create more safety? Maybe it's like a quick grounding practice, even a grounding meditation. That's always helped me. Maybe it's mirror work is another tool that's really, really helped me. That's really strange at first, but if you can get in the habit, if you can get in the habit of like, talking to yourself, it's so powerful, because like who else are you going to believe? Like you and I, Tricia, can talk all day, but until someone like has some of these experiences and then takes that next step forward, that's really when the magic's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And then one last thing I wanted to say about fear. Do you listen to Abraham Hicks?
I not regularly. I have though. Yes.
I'm pretty obsessed lately.
Yes.
For anyone who doesn't know, they're basically like a channeling of source energy and this woman named Esther Hicks. So they call themselves Abraham Hicks. And they had a quote that was more related to self-worth, but you can link it with fear really easily. Like if you don't feel like you're worthy of success, or maybe if you're afraid of success, you don't actually have to worry about that success because it's not going to come. Right? If you like don't feel worthy and you're afraid of that success or that change in your life, really don't worry about it, because it's not going to come your way if you're in that energy, which is kind of like a little harsh, but funny.
Yes. And I know I'm laughing because I'm like, wow, that's so relatable.
It is true. It's true.
And, and I think to some extent, like how I started off was like, at first I thought that I didn't have any fear because I thought that I worked through it. As you kind of take those steps forward and make those scary moves, fear is going to come up most likely. But that can also be a signal that you're kind of on the right path too.
And that you're growing, that you're doing new things, that you're expanding your life. Yeah.
Yeah. And another thing, and I can't remember what caused me to think about this. But as you were telling your story about like the trip that you're going to take, another like more terms that you can use is that was essentially the ego acting up, being like, oh my gosh, okay, wait, like this is not safe for us. This is not normal for us. Let's cancel everything. And so the ego can kind of have that frantic energy. And what has really helped me is then connecting to my higher self. And if that term doesn't resonate with you, like find something that does. That's essentially like, just kind of like the best possible version of you that's holding the highest vision for you. And ultimately what's really helped me is to realize that the ego and the higher self have the same goal in mind. And that same goal is like just to keep us, to keep us safe in our definition of safe. But like to help us reach our goals. The ego's way is just a little bit misguided help. So it's like, oh, I want to help you so much. And like, I want you to be loved and I want you to be accepted and I want you to be successful. But that's really scary to do these things. So I'm going to like get in your way. Whereas the higher self sees things from like, kind of that ego only sees things like through tunnel vision. Whereas the higher self can see things in like a big perspective, and be like, actually, I don't have to fear that, like because you just have such big visions. So that really helped me like just realize that they both have the same goal in mind for us, so that we don't demonize the ego and demonize ourselves for going to that place of like freaking out.
Right. Yeah, that's helpful too. And sometimes I even think of like ego versus kind of intuition and like my deepest knowing, my deepest sense of like the universe in my body. So yeah, I like that too. I'm glad you pointed that out. Do you want to do a different question?
Yeah.
Okay. So another question I got on Instagram was, how do I not feel like I have to do it all? So this is one, oh my God, I can relate to this. Like this is like my life challenge. When I figure this out, I'll be like totally my highest self.
Yes.
But one area that I think that we kind of already touched on is, honestly, which I've given this advice to clients too, and it's really scary, but see what happens when you let a ball drop, right? So if you think of like all your things you have to do, which also that's a story, you don't have to do anything except be born and die, really.
Yeah.
But when you think of all these balls that you're juggling, what happens if you let one drop? Because oftentimes nothing really happens. Like if you think about at work, I remember this is something I had to learn quickly in the corporate world, because like in college and high school, you know, group projects, I never let the ball drop. I always just like picked up everyone's slack and whatever, got it done. But then when you're in more of the like corporate world, that's just like too much. That's too much, right? Like everyone's an adult. And so I remember I finally a couple times would be like, you know what, I can't answer all these emails, or I can't get back to everyone, which this is something I still struggle with as a coach now. And you know what happens if you like leave some messages in your inbox and you don't respond to everyone that you're maybe supposed to respond to that day? Nobody cares if you do it the next day. Really, nobody cares. So that's one exercise. Like obviously start with whatever feels the least scary. But if you feel like you have 20 things on your to-do list, what would happen if you just kind of crossed 2 of those out, or slotted 2 of them for the next day or 3 days from now, and just kind of play with that a little bit to start like popping this belief again.
Yeah. This question like really ties into kind of what we were talking about, like how it's not selfish to take you time. It's also not selfish for you not to do everything. So you know, it's also about looking at your expectations that you have for yourself and the expectations that you think that others have for you. Because, and sometimes it's all about communication too. If you're feeling overwhelmed, like, can you have that conversation with a significant other, with a family member, and just be like, you know, actually, I can't take care of the turkey this year. Like, you know, would you be willing to do this? And so it's about, and most of the time they'll be like, oh, of course, I didn't even realize that you had so much to do. So it's kind of analyzing like those expectations that you have for yourself and the expectations that you think that others have for you. Because a lot of times if you have that conversation, those expectations, they never had them in the first place. It's you placing your own expectations kind of in their mouths.
Yeah.
So
that's a really good point. And I like that example for the holidays too. And another thing that I think makes us feel like we have to do so much this time of year is it's kind of a time of year of excess.
Yeah.
Like excess food, excess spending, excess like together time, right? Especially if you're like hosting family, extra people in your house. So a good practice for that might be just noticing, where are the areas of excess that I feel like there is too much right now? And how can I minimize that? Like if you feel like there's excess spending and it's stressing you out, can you like do a Secret Santa or something that like takes it down a notch? And again, this comes back to like that idea of presence over the holidays, like not the gift, but like being present versus like all these other things that have been commercialized, and coming back to just like what's important to me and my family this time of year, and just simplifying.
Yeah. And I'm sure, you know, we've all heard about like prioritizing our to-do lists as well. Like really get honest with yourself of like, okay, well, what are the most important things that I need? Again, that can even be a story in itself, but that I need to get done today or this week or whatever. And yeah, I really liked what you said of just play around with like what happens if you don't get it done. And that's again like analyzing that fear there. Okay, if you don't have this perfect meal, or if you don't have, you know, if you didn't spend X, Y, and Z on all these gifts, what is the fear there? Like, what does that mean to you? Does it mean that you won't have a good holiday season? Okay, then that's your opportunity to analyze that. If you don't have a clean house for your guests, what does that mean? Oh, that means that you're lazy. That means that you're dirty. That means all of these things. Okay, now it's an invitation now to analyze that. Like, can you find compassion for yourself, or can you find acceptance for that aspect as well? Because all of us, this is kind of getting like really deep, but like all of us have all aspects, right? So all of us in some ways are lazy or are dirty or are whatever. So can we find acceptance for those parts of ourselves? Because then if someone sees our house and it's like a chaotic mess, it's not going to be triggering for us. And if they say something like, oh, wow, okay, you know, your house isn't as clean as it's used to, or, oh, wow, okay, looks like, you know, you've really let this go. It, as once you find acceptance for that part, it's not going to trigger you then. Because they can say whatever it is that they want, and then you can still hold your truth, which is like, okay, my house isn't sparkling clean, and that's okay to me.
Yeah. And that's practice too, right? A lot of the things we're talking about aren't like a switch that you're just going to flip and you're like, cool, it's good, we're good. But just those little bits of practice, that awareness, coming back to that awareness again and again and again, I think that's really powerful to build the life that you want without all these expectations or judgments on your shoulders.
Right. Yeah. We just got done talking about fear. Like, fear might come up in this instance too. Fear of dropping the ball, or fear of having a messy house, or fear of not getting the perfect gift. But it's kind of an opportunity. Like, this is your opportunity to move through that fear, not just kind of, you know, give up or revert to your old tendencies, which is to do it all. Because then, like, who really is that serving? You know, no one probably really cares.
Yeah. And then again, you just get closer and closer to kind of that burnout, feeling like, or feeling underappreciated, which isn't fun either.
Yeah.
You feel like, oh, wow, nobody even noticed. I spent 5 hours cleaning my house. That's like the same. That's equally sucky. So just releasing it from both ends. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good reminder.
Yeah.
And then we had a third question that I'm going to let you start on for sure, because the question was just kind of like hypnosis and eating disorders. Yeah. So maybe you just kind of want to touch on how beliefs are related to eating disorders, and we can talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And the first thing that I'm sure that we would both echo in this is that, you know, if you are struggling with an eating disorder now, definitely reach out for help. You know, for professional help, whatever that looks like for you. If that's a therapist, or if you know, need to go to a facility or whatever, like, find a professional, because this is something, you know, that that affects a lot of people. And it can, when I'm talking about like it from the belief standpoint, I don't want people to get the wrong idea and confused of like, oh, okay, well, you're just saying that it's so easy again to like snap out of it, or like to choose a different way. This is like very similar to like how I would approach addiction too. You know, like, it's not like you can just be like, well, just stop doing that. Like, it's much deeper than that. So definitely get the support that you need. But in terms of eating disorders, I have worked with a number of clients on eating disorders, and kind of like what we had talked about right at the top of this was that anytime that I'm dealing with health related things, or like weight loss or food, really, it's never about the food, and it's always something deeper. So whether I'm working on an eating disorder, or someone who wants to lose weight, or someone, you know, who struggles with like just emotional eating. It's always something deeper than the food. So, just I'm trying to think of like how to word this, but just kind of like going deeper within yourself and just sitting with yourself and being like, okay, well, like, why is this coming up, or what does this mean for me? And trying to find a greater sense of self-love within yourself. And I know when I'm talking about it, it sounds like it's just very surface level, but this is actually very profound and very important work. We had mentioned mirror work. That's a big thing to do. But in terms of like how hypnotherapy can help with, eating disorders or anything like that, is essentially our subconscious mind is where our beliefs are stored, our habits are stored, our memories are stored, even some, like automatic bodily functions like breathing or digestion. That's all in the subconscious mind. And our subconscious mind makes up 90% of our mind. So that's a huge portion. So a lot of times when we think about, if it is, let's just say, binge eating, a lot of times we try to fix it from a conscious standpoint. And so we're like, okay, well, then I just have to like get rid of all the foods that I usually binge on, and I have to, lock my refrigerator, and I have to do all of these things like on the conscious level. Or you kind of get hard on yourself of like, oh, why is it that I just can't stop eating? Like, why? And it just, it feels so out of control, and it can feel very, just like very hopeless or just very out of control. But what's happening is that is actually in your subconscious. And our subconscious, because it makes up 90%, it also is, we can't readily access that when we are just going throughout our day, going throughout our motions. So if that is a habit, or if there's some belief there, like maybe, it's hard to generalize because it can be a different belief for everyone, but maybe the belief is like, oh, I'm not worthy of this. Or maybe the belief is like, I'm unlovable, so therefore I need to, do this. It's really hard to generalize, but if there's a belief there, it's important to go to the subconscious level. But then from a habit perspective as well, the subconscious mind is like the first place that you would want to go, and whatever health habit that you're trying to establish. But like I was saying, you can't readily access our subconscious mind just by me, talking to you and you talking to me. So if I was like, well, just snap out of it, just do something different, like that's not going to help, because there is what we call the critical factor of the mind. So that is kind of like this barrier that protects our subconscious mind, and it divides our conscious mind from our subconscious mind. So in order to bypass this wall or this critical factor that's kind of serving as that barrier, it also serves as this like sounding board. Like it will only accept the things that we already believe from a conscious level. So if you fully believe like that you're beautiful, and I was like, you're beautiful, you would be like, oh, great, thanks. If you don't actually believe that, that's why compliments can be so hard to receive sometimes, because we're like, oh, because it's that critical factor of the mind, it's not ever going to penetrate the subconscious. So, so the way to bypass that critical factor of the mind is by going into the theta brainwave state, which essentially you're just slowing down your brainwaves. All of us go in and out of the state of hypnosis every day. So as soon as you wake up and as you're going to sleep, those are the most common times. But if you've ever found yourself daydreaming and things like that, so if you're again, seek professional help. But if you're struggling, maybe a really a good starting off point is to begin to develop those and create those neural pathways when we're in that more receptive state. Because when we're in that theta brainwave state, we're more suggestible. And again, that barrier, that wall is now down. So you can then, whether it's saying affirmations to yourself, that can be really helpful. Or if you are visualizing a life where you're free from, the things that you're struggling with, or you're free from being like tied to food, and you just feel like so good in your body. And again, this can be really personal to you. So visualizing whatever it is that your end goal is, then you're actually creating new neural pathways in your mind. So now you're essentially forming like a habit just by visualizing it when you're in that theta brainwave state. So that's like kind of, a really simple, generalized answer, but I hope that like made sense when I explained it.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. And just to, talk from a personal level too, I know I have struggled with an eating disorder on and off for like, it was years of my life, probably because I didn't like tackle it head on. And, we can kind of compare and contrast this with disordered eating, which would be kind of like some of those things you mentioned, right? I can't keep X food in the house. Or one thing I've worked with a lot of women on is like they used to feel like they couldn't bake cookies with their kids because they would eat them all. And like one of my clients told me a couple weeks ago, she's like, we made these amazing like pumpkin cream cheese muffins, and I remember my kids brought it up to me. They were like, Mom, you haven't made these in so long. And she was like, I told them it was because, I felt like I couldn't have them in the house. And she's like, my kids noticed that. And now she's like past it because we've done all this work on food and mindset. But a lot of those little things kind of go unnoticed, but those are powerful disordered eating, habits that are affecting your life, probably your family, probably your career. So I'm glad someone did ask this question, because I do think it's important to look at, especially at this time of year, if these things are coming up, use that as an invitation. Like there's a little bit more work I could do here. And I didn't do hypnosis work with my eating disorder because it was like before I discovered it, unfortunately. I could see how that would be so helpful. But one thing I have talked about on my podcast is work with plant medicine. That really, really helped me. And this is actually a field that's being explored a little bit more, because it really allowed me to see, like, I could like see my eating disorder as like, I am not my eating disorder, right? That is not me, but I could see this, like it as something that has been living in me. And that was really powerful too, to just like create some of that separation and be like, I am not disordered. I am not broken. There is nothing wrong with me, but I've been letting this thing live within me, which is the same for all of our beliefs. If you think about it, like that's why I talk about awareness all the time. And I know you do too, because we're living with these beliefs, whether we notice them or not, whether they're harmful or helpful. So always coming back to that awareness and just being like, oh, is this a story I'm telling myself? Or is this serving me right now? Even really simple questions like that to start to separate, like, I believe everyone is source energy, is God, or whatever in this 3D earth realm. And so there is nothing wrong with you. You are not broken if you feel like you're struggling with food. It is just this belief that maybe has a lot of power with where you're at in your life right now. So using hypnotherapy, working with a different type of specialist, maybe looking into plant medicine or some other modality, whatever calls to you, to come back to kind of like you said, like your higher self, your intuition, your deepest knowing. And because that at the end of the day, like if we can all return to that and remember that there is no separation, like that's really a myth that we're separate from source or beauty or pleasure. We are all of those things. So anything I think that starts to bring you back to that state is going to be helpful too. But it all starts with awareness, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes it can be helpful to have a diagnosis just to bring that awareness piece to it. But as soon as we identify with that diagnosis, that's when it can be really disempowering. So I know that this isn't specifically eating disorder related, but although you can see like the ties to this, I used to say all the time, like, oh, I have depression. Okay. Or I am depressed. Okay. Well, now I'm telling myself like I am a depressed person. That's now my identity. So again, going back to the ego or to what is normal, that is my identity. That's what's normal. So whenever I am outside of that, my ego is always going to pull me back into that place. Yeah. Instead, it can be more empowering to say, I am experiencing depression, because that creates that separation. You aren't depression. You aren't your eating disorder. It's something that you're experiencing now. And also, having compassion for that part of you that is experiencing that as well. Oftentimes what I've seen with eating disorders is that people feel so much shame and guilt around it. And that is actually perpetuating this, because if we can't talk about it, or if we can't actually like sit with it and find that acceptance, again, easier said than done. And I totally can relate to this. But that is kind of perpetuating this cycle, because there's this guilt and shame. And another thing with eating disorders too that I've noticed a lot with clients is that a lot of times it's this inability to sit and process their emotions. So then we turn to other things that we can control. So we think that we can control then, restricted eating, or we think that we can control, oh, okay, well, now I'm going to emotionally eat. Oh my gosh, now I ate too much. Now, I'm going to purge, and now it's this vicious cycle. So a lot of times it can be like unprocessed emotions and the inability to like really find safety in your body for experiencing those emotions. So one, I know that can feel like, oh my gosh, like, well, what do I do with that? One thing that this is a holistic doctor, and it was actually on the tail end of when I was experiencing like very strong disordered eating. But I'm so glad that she recommended this, because it's like not what you think a doctor would prescribe you. But she prescribed me basically two things. She said, cry more than you think, like that is possible for you. Like whenever you feel tears are coming up, like just let it out. Oh my gosh. Now I used to never cry. Now I cry so much. And it's a beautiful thing. Like I cry in joyful times and I cry in sad times. It's just this release. Like I'm releasing it from my body. So now I don't hold on to that. And another thing was that she had me like journal every night and just write out whatever it is that I'm feeling. So, okay, I'm feeling, this, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling this. Now you're getting it out so that you're not holding on to that. And I would allow myself to actually feel that instead of push that away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's really powerful. It's funny that we want to reach for control so often, but it's usually we need the opposite.
Yeah.
Like, remember, I like to think of control as basically the ego, like we've been talking about. And if you think about your highest self or your intuition, that's kind of like trust, right? So it's almost the opposite. Like if you want to control, and you're like, I just need to lock my cabinets. That's the ego. And being able to call it out and be like, you know what would happen if I trusted myself instead? How can I give my body some extra trust today? And taking that time to create that, just like with some of the practices you've mentioned, I feel like we did a pretty good job with some practical today, right?
Yeah. I know. Yeah. Not just like these big concepts, but actually take some of these practices, begin to implement some of them, kind of do a trial and error and find what works for you. And then you can always dive deeper into things once you kind of figure out what you feel is resonating with you.
Definitely. Yeah. And I can't believe we're already at an hour. But
I know.
Before we wrap up, I just wanted to let everyone know if this was, if you enjoyed this, if you like kind of the topics that we're talking about, and we did talk a little bit about goals and everything for next year, I do have an intuitive goal setting program coming out that's going to be free. It's going to be 3 days of basically an email series that we do as a group. So keep a lookout for that. It should be live next week, I think, hopefully, fingers crossed. And I created that to really like have this place where you come back to what your soul wants for 2022 versus setting goals on the external based on the ego, all these things we've been talking about. So keep a lookout for that, everyone. Do you have anything fun coming up, Tricia?
Well, so I am launching my first ever group program, which I'm super excited about. So this is called Aligned Success. So this is actually like kind of piggybacking off of what you said of a lot of times we set our goals or our idea of success on other people's expectations. And when we reach those certain marks, like for me, it was like getting the dream job and then getting, I don't know, people have so many different ideas of what success means to them. And then once they finally achieve that, then they still feel like empty inside, or they don't feel fulfilled, or maybe they've even reached a state of burnout. For me, that was what happened. I was, people would look at my life and think that it was so great and perfect, but really I was feeling very unfulfilled, probably the unhappiest I ever was. And I just couldn't figure out why nothing was sticking. And I also couldn't reach my next levels easily. Like it was all about just working harder. So Aligned Success is really designed to not to demonize success, because a lot of times it's easy for us to be like, oh, okay, so money doesn't make me happy. No, it's that you don't have first like that fulfillment inside of yourself first before you have the money. So it's about reaching these goals that are really aligned with your soul's desires instead of the ego, and achieving them like in more of a flow way so that it doesn't have to feel so hard. So that's actually going to be, I was actually on the fence of starting it in December or January, but I've made the decision. I'm actually going to start it in January just to kind of kick off the new year really strong. So yeah, if anyone's interested in that, the link is in my bio, but also my DMs are always open, whether it's about the program or anything that we discussed today or anything really in general. I'm super open to chat with anyone.
Yeah. We're both pretty open books. So hit us up if you guys have any questions.
Yes, definitely. And in the live, then I'll be sure to tag you. So, but is there anything else that you wanted to share in terms of how people can reach you and your work?
Yeah, DMs would be best. Keep a lookout for that challenge. I'll have a course coming up here in January too. Big days for us ahead. So yeah, stay tuned. And like Tricia said, we're always here if you guys have questions or if you want us to do another one of these.
Yes. Yeah. If you have additional questions or things that you want us to touch on, comment below on this video, or if you're able to figure out how to post it to yours as well, you can comment in on Coach Caroline's as well. And we can do another one because I feel like we can talk. Well, clearly we can talk for hours. So
right now.
Yes. Thank you everyone though for joining and for being patient with us as we talk your ears off. But it was so great to see you. Thank you so much for coming on, and we'll have to do another one soon.
I know, this was so fun. Great ideas, and thanks everyone for the questions. And I'm sure we both hope you have just an easy, peaceful, enjoyable holiday season.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Bye, everyone.